Please help me welcome Director S.J. Chiro, actress Victoria Summer Felix, and Mr. Jewel Johnson. And if we are ready, Lee, are we ready to pull up Mr. Scarrett on screen? Just so you know, he's seeing what you're all seeing, so he's watching the screen and was watching the end of the movie with us. So, and he will be able to see you, but he'll see the backs of your heads. So, and he'll be able to hear you once we get him up here with the questions. There he is. Good evening, Mr. Scarrett. We can hear you, yes. Can you hear us? Lee, can you adjust that? Awesome. Is that better? Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but just, I got to work at it.
That's all right. We will go easy, and he's going to try to adjust some volume while we do that.
Anyway, in any case, hi, you guys.
Hi. Nice. They are clapping in case you can't hear that. Bravo on an amazing, incredible acting job, don't you all think? Mr. Tom Scarrett literally carrying the film. Can you see SJ and Jewel and Victoria? I'm not sure if they're big enough on your screen. Mr. Scarrett, I'm going to fire the first question to you. See, he can see us. I'm going to fire the first question to you. I understand you were attached to this project before the beautiful and wonderful SJ came along. Can you tell us how this project started and how you got involved in it?
Well, yes, I can tell you that. Glad to. David Goodison's a friend. I was teaching at a school, a class I had at Fort Lewis, teaching storytelling to PTS vets coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan at the time. And I invited David to come in and give a class on storytelling. Afterward, he said, I'd love to do East of the Mountain at some point, and I'd love to have you play the doctor. And I said, I love the book, I'd love to be involved with it. We want to do it here in Washington. We've got to do it here in Washington. Can we raise the money here in Washington? And he said, I'll see what I can do. And he did it.
Yes, he did, and it's a wonderful film, wonderful film. When did SJ come along in the process? And SJ, either you or Mr. Scarrett can answer that.
You asking me that again? I'm barely hearing you.
That's all right. We'll let S.
You want to go ahead with that?
Yeah, SJ.
Sure. Yes. So the producer is Jane Charles. She's wonderful, and I happen to know her in the community, in the Seattle community, and we had wanted to work together for a really long time. And one day she called me up, and she sent me the screenplay. She said, "Would you like to be involved?" She said, "Tom Scarrett is already attached." I said, "Say no more. I am in." And that's basically how it came to be.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I'll just add on to that is that the money people wanted to have all women and Washington State women to do this. So that's what we did.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
When was this shot? I mean, obviously pre-COVID and everything, yes? When was it shot, and what was the time frame between conception of the idea and to what we're seeing tonight, from when Tom got involved?
Oh, God, I don't know. Leslie, you got any ideas?
Yes, I do know. So Tom and David Goodison worked on it for about 4 years. They talked about it back and forth, and then Jane came on board, and that's when things really started moving. Then she hired me. And so we took a very small crew out in, I think, November of 2018. And we did 2.5 days of shooting the color because we knew we were going to shoot in springtime. And this is a fall. It had to take place in the fall because hunting happens only in the fall. So we had 2.5 days to get all those beautiful shots that you saw in the beginning on the drive, and that's all the fall color. And then we came back in 2019, that was the bulk of the shooting, the principal photography. Springtime of 2019, April through June, early June. Yeah. And then, of course, we know what happened after the edit. A big pandemic happened and kind of stopped us for a little while. But then we finished up post-production, and here we are now, finally seeing it on a big screen for the first time. So it's a real treat. Thank you so much for having us.
I raise your hand and I'll come to you with the microphone if you've got a question or a comment, but I'd like to just comment you on the tension that you built in that final scene, of course, that pivotal scene. I had not read the book this was based on, Snow Falling on Cedars, so I didn't know this. When we saw the film the first time, I did not know how it was going to end, and just like this audience, you could have heard a pin drop. How difficult was it shooting that scene and doing those cuts? I know a lot of it was done in editing with the flashbacks and things, but talk about that process for you and for Tom, of course.
Well, I'll start, but that was a day that I was a little nervous about because, you know, it was a very intense day. And Tom was just incredible, absolutely astonishing on that day, and really created this feeling and this emotion, and you know, then that made it easy for us in the edit to, you know, cut back and forth because you felt everything that Tom was feeling. So,
Absolutely.
I don't know if you want to add to that, Tom.
That sounds good.
And do you have any feeling on, you know, this brings up such an important issue of the end of life decisions and people's right to, you know, do what they want, that kind of thing. Was there any particular feeling you were hoping to emote from this whole process in regards to that?
Well, for me, anyway, this film became extremely personal, more personal than I ever could have imagined. My dad, during the pre-production process, his health started to fail. And one day he told me, "Oh yeah, that was when I fainted." And I said, "What? You what? What's happening?" He said, "Oh yeah, don't worry about it. I've been on oxygen." You know, I was just like, what are you talking about? You know, so it was very, very similar to the dynamic between Renee and Ben. And unfortunately, my dad died 4 days before we finished shooting. So it was a lot, you know, became very, very personal. But there was something that I was interested in, and that was there's kind of a battle between rugged individualism and the need for other people. And so I thought that contrast was something that just goes throughout the whole film, you know. And there's a time for personal responsibility, of course, but there's also a time for including others, you know.
Absolutely. Tom, how do you prepare for a role like this? So much of this was so deeply personal and deeply you, and you alone acting a lot of the times and pulling the emotion out of it with us just watching you on camera. How do you prepare for a role like this?
Well, I proposed, I had to prepare for 21 days straight shooting. I've never been in a film where I shot, worked every day 21 days. So did I have the energy? Did I have the mileage in me to do that 21 days is really what I was concerned about. It was clear to me, and from the book and from what David had said, that this character, being a doctor for 40 years, was, you just think these things through. You don't open a book and start reading about how a doctor behaves or anything. I don't know what people think about acting. It's a conglomerate of all of our life experiences, basically. Everything we feel is what comes out in a character. So I've known people like this in my lifetime who have been confronted with, late in life, confronted with issues that are difficult to deal with. And in this case, it was a doctor has all these habits of the surgeon for 40 years, we'll say. Suddenly he's retired. What do you do with those habits that you have? Well, maybe the best thing to do is your wife has said, we always want to go to Alaska, let's take that trip to Alaska. She dies when you make that decision. And then you've got a daughter who's going through a divorce, and he's having differences with her. And then I'm in the midst of, do I have cancer? We don't have that straight yet at this point. And it's this confusion of what does, if I have cancer, that means I have all this equipment stuck into my arms, trying to save me in my 80s, and how can I deal with it? Can I deal with it? All this stuff is going on. So with his own, all he's got is his discipline from being a doctor. So he's got to hang on and just simply try to work it out by going out and hunting, which is what David did when he, by the way, when he was young. He used to love to go out in that area and hunt for birds. So a lot of it really started with that. The book started with that. And so it was a matter of grabbing a dog and taking him on out there and teaching him how to go after the birds and just start with that. I didn't know where the character did not know where he was going to go with this. He's got a gun. He's got something subconsciously stewing, which could be a suicide. That's a consideration. That becomes clear by the clues that a director dropped along the way. And the rest of it is what you saw. Basically, he gets to where he just might blow his brains out, and we don't know until we know, do we?
Okay. Tom, I was
I
wondering.
don't know if any of that made sense, but it's just basically, you can't predetermine how you're going to behave from one day to another. If you're going to do art, you've got to just do it impulsively and instinctively. And I've been doing this stuff for 50 years, so it's not that difficult to embrace a character in a certain way, which was to be holding back your feelings, because that's the way doctors are, and try to hold on to them as long as you could. It was all I had as a retired doctor.
If I could just add on to that really quickly, this was a very rugged, difficult shoot, and Tom was absolutely phenomenal and in really good shape. Incredible what I put him through. Sometimes I felt a little guilty. We had high winds. We had blistering cold. The coldest I've ever been was in that quarry, 4 o'clock in the morning. It was horrible. We had heat so bad we had to cut the sleeves out of Tom's costume because it was blistering hot. You know, it was like terrible. And then that dogfight, you know, and I was just like, oh, Tom, here's a kick that I learned in the dojo, and I was showing him, and then I was like, what am I doing? But of course, Tom just executed it, and I think it really sells the whole dogfight, you know? I mean, bravo to Tom. I mean, 21 days of shooting is a lot, and it was under brutal conditions, mostly outdoors, so I gotta give it up to you, Tom.
Thank you. But I've been doing this stuff for 50 years, so it's what you do.
We've got a question here in the audience.
Tom, at that moment when the gun is to your neck and the flashbacks are happening to your youth and your connections with your loved ones, what do you think it is that pulls him, the gun away from killing you? What's the one thing? Is it a culmination of things? Or is there one thing? And the other question is, 6 months down the road, what does Ben do? Or 9 months down the road when he's really, really ill?
I'm trying to hear, I have to say, first of all, the volume is not very good here. So as far as, are you talking about the recall specifically?
Yes, during the contemplating suicide at the end. Yes, I think is what he meant, right? Yeah.
Well, that's sort of spaced somewhat along the road. It's just who knows when these things come up? But when you're on the road to dealing with your life, in a late time in your life, all things come surfacing. And this recall of this girl that he once met, the one he wanted to go to Alaska with, 50 years after a marriage, 40 years after a marriage. All of these things that death is never really anything that's fulfilled in any way. I mean, the sadness, what you didn't do for her, all these things come to the surface. It's all you got. You're running around out there shooting birds, and you begin to have hallucinations, if it were, but and bring back these people who are no longer in your life except for yourself. All the people in the recall probably were long gone. So it's just that kind of mystical thing that comes up when you're facing a decision like life or death, and life that may be short. And all these considerations that you are at a certain age and your life is short anyway. And life is inevitable, as the doctor knows. All this stuff that goes on in your head, and you can't show it. You can't show it so wisely. S.J. had it revealed that these are some of the things that are going on in his head. The love that he had once, the love that he still has. It's all there. It stays there.
Yeah, and one piece of that was really crucial to me was the scene where they are in the hospital and they have the new baby. Because you see him at the beginning kind of pushing away his daughter, telling her it's none of her business. And at the end, I think that he comes to a realization that maybe he does owe her something, you know, that this is his daughter, this is his family, this is her daughter, you know, I mean, so I think there was a little bit of that for me anyway, in that hospital scene with the baby.
All of that ties together. It all ties together. One thing touches the other. Everything we do, somehow or another. I love that last line out of River Runs Through It. Eventually all things turn into one and the river runs through it. And that's really what we're dealing with, is this flow of a life all coming back to one.
Beautiful. I'm gonna cut away from Tom for just a second to ask you about these two wonderful young actors you have on stage, and how did you cast them for the roles, and what was this like for each of you to see this up on the big screen with an audience, and a very crucial audience in your case, Jewel, hometown crowd?
It was you know, obviously these are very important people in the flashback, you know, and they really had to have chemistry. And I also wanted a blonde because the daughter is blonde, you know. So, but the way that Jewel and Victoria auditioned together just sealed the deal. But I would love for you guys to talk about your process, because we were talking in the car about how important building trust is for this relationship, and I found it very believable. I mean, they really touched me. So why don't you guys talk about it?
Oh, well, I remember, so you know, when you audition, you get to connect with a reader who doesn't really have a whole lot of emotional depth. So getting to then go to callbacks and connect with another actor is really special. And I remember working with Jewel in the callbacks, and it just soared. Like, honestly, I barely remember it happening because it was so present. And I just remember thinking, like, this guy's the one. He's gonna get it. But from that point on, like, there was just this immediate chemistry. And we've been such good friends ever since. And there was support through the whole thing. I mean, being pretty fresh actors in the world of feature films, and how freaky it was to delve into like a higher profile project than I was used to, and having the support of him. And I think our outside of camera time really bled into our on camera time, and our characters just connecting as deeply as we did.
Jewel, how about you?
Yeah, I knew you would get it too. I really did. We both felt it, and it happened that way, and we were right. And then we went and got sushi, but we wanted to do that just so, because you do want to be comfortable with each other, and form that bond, because it's a quick relationship to do on the camera, but we were comfortable with each other right away and trusted each other, and just really felt good, felt right.
And SJ, you really have 2 or 3 films you're shooting here. I mean, of course, the 21-day shoot with Tom, and then this part of the story. Was that a separate? Obviously, it was separate than those 21 days. How was that part of it? Was that part of the 21, or was
Not separate from the 21 days.
So it was the same time.
We had to do everything in 21 days. We did have that 2.5 days that I mentioned, just for B-roll. And then afterwards, we had some pickup, but there were with no actors. We shot the dead dog, and we shot feet walking, and things like that. Yeah, it wasn't always Tom's feet. So, sorry to give it away. But anyway, no, this was all part of it. But, when you're asking actors to be intimate, there's a protocol and there's a process. And, you don't just say like, okay, you guys just go kiss. That's a no-go, especially now when people are very familiar with abuses that happen. I've heard so many horror stories about that kind of thing. But so, I was lucky enough to be able to have a little bit of time to work with them and just to take it slow and just to say, is it okay if he touches your fingers? And, just like take it super, super slow and have them connecting with their eyes and breathing together, and so things that are not just like, okay, go make out. That I think that hurts a relationship, and so they had little time but enough time, I think, and they really made the use of time that I couldn't be with them. They would get together on their own, and I'm so grateful because I think the connection was really palpable.
It was beautiful, actually, and I think we can show our appreciation to the 2 of you. Even though poor Jewel, the kissing scene had to play out in front of his grandma, who was sitting very near him. Poor Marcia. Sorry about that. Tom, I want to ask you about kind of your. First of all, where are you? Because it's so beautiful. Are you in Washington State right now? We're seeing a gorgeous view from your windows.
Yeah, I'm at Dynamite. Yeah, this is looking out toward Mount Rainier. It's the office in my house in Seattle.
It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I want to ask you, because you've started something very special for filmmakers up in the Northwest. Can you talk about your Evergreen channel and what that does, and telling the stories of the upper Northwest?
I don't know how to describe it other than it's sort of the point I was going for a number of years for the film community here, to understand you have to write a good script first. Storytelling is everything. I was an English major in college, and I came out thinking, okay, if I'm going to get involved as a writer, director, or actor, and wound up to be an actor, you've got to be able to tell a story well. And it begins with a writer. It begins the rewrites, and the rewrites after rewrites. And ultimately, it's what the subtlety of a director will take on, and what they get from the script. And then the actors take on get on their own branch in the tree. And it all comes together. It's not easy to define that for any of us, to define how we get to what we're doing. We just know what we're doing and we trust it. It's the impulse of an actor, it's the artist, painter, sculptor, whatever it may be. But the thing that you suggest, Evergreen, which is on Stir Channel, on the app, was something I finally came to understanding that what we really need in Seattle is to have a business model where we can then develop, rather than having young people coming up to me with scripts that I thought needed rewrites. They would tell me that, well, the people who are willing to put up the money like the script the way it is. I heard too much of that. So I just finally said, okay, let them go ahead and find out what it's about. Because ultimately, very few, if any, of these films over the 30 years I've been following this film community were ever made and had revenue. If they were made, they did not have any revenue for those people who supported them, who brought money to them for the film. Not that they wanted it, but they sure would have loved to have it. And they would love to have a film that, if it were written all the way through, became the story that really should be told on film. It's just not the way to go about being a filmmaker. You really have to think of both sides. How do I engage the money people properly so that we can do another film after this together? That's the business, the way it goes. And this community was not really aware fully of that. So I started the school on how to tell a story well. And we had that for 15 years here. And I finally had a pipe from it because I had other things to do, and I started another program with storytelling down at Fort Lewis for incoming veterans, PTS veterans coming back from Iraq and Iran, Afghanistan. And it went from one to another. That's really where I encountered David was when he came down to teach a class. Forgive me if my speech is funny and the way I'm trying to get over called C. diff, hospitalized sickness that you get that really messes with your head and makes you, you get a little funny. So I get a little short memory in terms of how I tell a story now. And I lose words. So, in any case, getting back to the school was to teach them how to tell stories well. Unfortunately, we didn't have many local filmmakers coming in to learn these classes. We had these people coming from all over the world, from Latvia to Australia, England, Norway. It was interesting that because every summer we had this load of people from all over the world coming into the class. And they were coming in with good material. And whatever happens to the material once they get out there, we don't know. We don't cover that. We just hope they go out there with a better approach to it, a more professional approach to it, and an attitude about being aware that people who give you the money certainly would like to have some, if not a blockbuster project, certainly something that makes them feel good in the dark theater. So I like that film. I feel proud I'm attached to it. Those are two things that I became aware of a long time ago in the film business. That you really have to consider both sides, whether you're going to take the business seriously, because they often could not. They didn't understand what a camera looked like at the time. So it's all this stuff that I've experienced over my life that it's very difficult for me to say specifically why I do a certain thing. It's just because I feel I have to do it. And this film, East of the Mountain, is one of those films that has a possibility, except for COVID getting in the way. Things are changing dramatically now. For this film to go out into the theater, to be exposed, to bring revenue back to the people who put up the money. That's ideally what we really should be thinking about, and that's what I'm hoping for. I hope that answers your question.
No, it did. It answers the question beautifully. And it kind of segued to kind of the next thing, speaking about being proud of things, you know, you've had such an incredible and illustrious career both on the big screen and small screen. You know, of course, Top Gun, River Runs Through It, this film, of course, and of course, Picket Fences on TV. One of my favorites was Brothers and Sisters, even though you died in the first episode, but you came back in all the flashbacks. What, Tom, are you, I know it's like picking a favorite child, which is not right, but is there a particular work over these 50 years that you are most proud of as an actor that you've done?
You know, the confusion for me is I've always been driven to write and direct as well. And I've directed a lot of television back in the 90s, but I didn't want to become a television director, so I just stuck with that. And until I could produce my own film up here, where are we? Bullshit. I have to laugh at myself because I know where it's coming from. All of you, I hope, are realizing that I'm having fun here. And we should all have fun.
We are indeed.
Okay, so picking out one particular film, to be able to make a living doing what I do, to be able to be in 5 films that are not classic, a couple of them, MASH and Alien, are 2 of the 25 great films of the 20th century, and I had the good fortune of being with some of the best filmmakers before they became famous. Robert Altman was a mentor, and Hal Ashby, Academy Award-winning editor turned director, and did Harold and Maude and being there. So I had all these guys teaching me what they think films should be like. And then I had Ridley Scott, who I just followed around like a puppy on Alien, and picked up a lot of fun things he was telling me about in terms of shots, framing, and how to get depth in a film, and this, that, the other thing. So how can I possibly pick a favorite out of all this? Other than to say I was one film, A River Runs Through It. I've seen that more than any other films that I've made. A lot of films I've made I didn't see, but it moves me on every level every time I see it. And I've had occasion to see it, and I'm really drawn to see A River Runs Through It because it really is what America was once. That the character I played basically was based on my dad, and I played him the way he was, and very restrained in his emotion. Never would say, "I love you" to your children. That was the way it was then. It's a beautiful sadness about who and what we were, and I think that probably is amongst all of them. And I've been lucky to be in a ballet film with Shirley MacLaine and Bancroft back in the 70s, and a few other films like that I learned so much on as a person. And what you learn as a person is what you give to your art. So that I have been able to do this is my favorite picture.
Wonderful. Can you tell us about, and this is maybe more of an SJ question, what's the journey of this film? Now that we're coming out of, hopefully post-COVID, will you be putting it in film festivals? I know we're all looking for a distribution deal, those kind of things. What is this journey going to next for East of the Mountains?
Thank you for asking that. I can neither confirm nor deny that we have distribution. It hasn't been announced yet. But just in case, look for this film in your theaters at the end of September, I hope. And please tell all your friends and relatives to come and see Tom's beautiful performance, these beautiful actors' performances, and we really appreciate your support. A film like this lives and dies on word of mouth, and your word of mouth matters so, so much. So we would be very honored and grateful when or if you see that it might be coming to theaters at the end of September, please tell your friends and your family and everyone you know to come and see this film.
And I hope, yes, we will for sure. And I hope that you'll put it in the Port Townsend Film Festival. I don't know if you're planning on that, yes?
That's right. That is the next film festival.
Nice.
But, you know, I mean, this is the thing is like we had very few, Jane really wanted to be very select with the very few festivals because she wanted to focus on distribution. So we had Seattle. We have Sedona, and we're so grateful. This has just been a treasure and a treat and something that we will all remember forever because seeing it for the first time, hearing it for the first time on this beautiful sound system has just been incredible. And then Port Townsend, which is in Washington State. So, you know, yeah. So that's it for our festival run, like very tight and short. Also due in a big part to COVID because we just didn't want to be keeping on screening just online, you know?
Right.
It's
It's a film that needs to be seen on the big screen
That's
with that
right.
incredible cinematography and those shots that you have. Mr. Scarrett, before you have to check off tonight, I would like to present you with our Lifetime Achievement Award. So I'm going to read this. We will be shipping you the award since you're there and I'm here. And it says the Sedona International Film Festival 2021 Lifetime Achievement Award, Tom Scarrett, in honor of your passion and dedication to acting and your commitment to the art of independent filmmaking, in recognition of your outstanding career bringing memorable characters to life on screen and in our hearts, and in appreciation of your devotion to making films that make a difference. Thank you for sharing your passion with us. Mr. Tom Scarrett, Lifetime Achievement honoree. And if you all want to stand up and look back at the webcam, he'll be able to see your faces, because he's been seeing the backs of your heads. Thank you, Tom. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and zooming in. And thank you all so much for being here tonight and sharing this premiere with us. Make sure you vote for both films, Marble Canyon on top and East of the Mountains on the bottom.
Don't forget to vote. It's really, really important to independent films. So thank you so much. And thank you, Patrick. We are so honored. This is wonderful.